3 million years ago, in what would become the Lutoli Plains of Tanzania, something extraordinary happened in volcanic ash. A small group of beings walked upright through the cooling dust, leaving footprints that would survive longer than mountains. Not just footprints in ash, but the first evidence of creatures walking as we do today. What if you could step into those ancient tracks and follow them back through deep time? These were the footsteps of Australopithecus afarensis, neither fully ape nor fully human, but something wonderfully between. And among them walked one we now call Lucy, though she never knew that name or any other. The volcanic ash that preserved their steps would turn to stone, waiting 3 million years for discovery. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to be the first to walk upright beneath an ancient sky? Lucy stood just over 3 feet tall, her brain no larger than a chimpanzee's. Yet she changed everything. Her kind lived in a world of constant danger, where every shadow could hide death with curved teeth. The savannas of East Africa stretched endlessly before them, golden grass hiding both promise and peril. They moved in small family groups, perhaps a dozen souls against the vastness of an untamed world. Their hands, freed by walking upright, could now grasp and carry and shape the world around them. Stone tools were still 1 million years in their future, but their fingers were learning to be clever. Each morning they descended from the acacia trees where they slept safe. From the fang hunters below, the ground trembled sometimes with the footsteps of elephants, whose tusks curved like questions against the sky. Lucy's people communicated in ways we cannot imagine, perhaps with gestures and calls lost to time forever. They knew every tree, every water source, every safe path through their territory of thorn and stone. When the rains came, they watched the world turn green, understanding seasons in ways we have forgotten. When drought gripped the land, they traveled further, following ancient paths carved by generations before them. Their feet, with that distinctive arch and forward-facing toe, left prints that spoke of a revolution. Walking upright meant seeing predators from farther away, meant carrying food back to hungry children. It meant exposing their soft bellies to the world, trading safety for the promise of something greater. Can you imagine the courage it took to stand up in a world designed for creatures on 4 legs? Lucy lived perhaps 20 years, ancient by the standards of her kind, a matriarch of experience. She had seen children born and lost, seasons of plenty and seasons when the earth itself seemed hostile. Her bones tell us she fell from a tree, perhaps while sleeping, perhaps while reaching for fruit. The fall broke her bones in a pattern forensic scientists recognize, a story written in fractured calcium. She died alone or surrounded by her kind. We cannot know, but her body settled into mud. That mud would become her tomb and her immortality, preserving her for an unimaginable journey through time. Meanwhile, across the generations, her descendants continued their slow experiment with walking, thinking, becoming. Fire was still a mystery to them, a thing that swept across grasslands, terrifying and transformative. They could not make it, could not control it, could only flee when the horizon turned orange. Yet something in their developing minds must have been fascinated by its power to change everything. The stones they sometimes used to crack nuts were not yet tools, merely convenient objects. But their hands were learning the weight of stone, the angle of impact, the physics of survival. In the fossil record, we find their teeth worn down from grinding tough plants and roots. They were not hunters yet, but scavengers and gatherers, living on nature's edges and leftovers. When a lion abandoned a kill, they would creep forward, using stones to crack open bones. Inside those bones lay marrow, rich with calories, the fuel that would eventually grow larger brains. Not just survival, but the first glimpses of innovation, problem-solving with stones and patience. What would Lucy think if she knew her footsteps would outlast the mountains she could see? Time moved differently then, measured not in hours but in seasons, not in years but in generations. Each small group that wandered the savannah carried the entire future of humanity in their genes. They did not know they were special, did not know they were the experiment that would succeed. Around them, other species of early humans lived and died, branches on the tree that would not flourish. Paranthropus with their massive jaws, designed for grinding plants, a different solution to survival. But Lucy's kind had something else, a flexibility, an adaptability that would prove decisive. Their children took longer to mature, requiring more care, more teaching, more time to learn. This extended childhood created bonds, communities, the first stirrings of what we might call culture. Mothers carried infants differently now, on their hips, freeing one hand for gathering food. The shape of their pelvis, evolved for walking, made birth more dangerous than for their ancestors. Every successful birth was a victory against anatomy, every child who survived a triumph. They had no language as we know it, but they had communication, warning calls, and comfort sounds. When predators appeared, they would shriek alarms that sent the group scrambling for the trees. Do you ever wonder what songs they might have hummed to their children in the African dusk? Fast forward to a million years, and Lucy's descendants have conquered fire and shaped sophisticated stone. They have spread across continents, adapted to ice and desert, become the planet's most successful primate. And then, perhaps 40,000 years ago, something remarkable happens in the archaeological record. We find the first bone needles, carved with stone tools, polished smooth, with eyes for thread, not just tools for survival, but tools for creation, for making clothing that fits, that decorates. These needles, some no thicker than modern ones, speak of patience, skill, and aesthetic sense. The hands that carved them were fully human, but they carried Lucy's legacy in every movement. From footprints in ash to needles in bone, the journey took 3 million years of small steps. Each needle required hours of work, scraping, grinding, polishing bone into something delicate and precise. The thread they used came from plant fibers or animal sinew, twisted into strength. With these needles, they sewed leather and fur, creating clothes that allowed them to survive winters. But more than survival, they decorated their garments with shells and beads. The first fashion statements. What inner drive compelled them to make beautiful things in a world that demanded only survival? The same hands that once merely grasped branches now created art that would outlast civilizations. In caves across Europe and Asia, we find these needles beside painted walls and carved figures. The beings who made them were us, Homo sapiens, but they carried Lucy's gift of upright walking. Every stitch they sewed was possible because millions of years ago, Lucy's kind stood up. The needle's eye, so small and perfect, required vision that could focus on minute detail. That vision evolved from eyes that once scanned grasslands for danger, seeking patterns in the grass. Stone memories tell us this story. Fossils and artifacts separated by eons, but connected by blood. Lucy never imagined needles, never dreamed of clothing, never knew her footsteps would become immortal. Yet every human achievement, from needles to spacecraft, began with her first upright steps. The volcanic ash that preserved her kind's footprints was the earth itself taking notice. Today, scientists kneel beside those footprints, measuring the stride length of our earliest ancestors. They can tell that one was smaller, perhaps a child, walking beside an adult through danger. The tracks show no sign of hurry, just a steady walk through a landscape we can barely imagine. Perhaps they were following water or food or simply moving because movement meant survival. 3 million years later, we follow their path with satellites and ground-penetrating radar. We have mapped their bones, sequenced their DNA, given names to the nameless dead. Lucy lies in a museum now, her bones carefully preserved, visited by millions of her descendants. Children press their noses to the glass, looking at the skeleton that connects them to deep time. The bone needles, too, rest in climate-controlled cases, testament to humanity's urge to create. From footprint to needle, from walking to sewing, the story spans more time than we can comprehend. If Earth's history were compressed into a single day, Lucy walked just seconds before midnight. The needles were carved in the last fraction of that final second before the present moment. We are the inheritors of both achievements, walking upright and creating beauty with our freed hands. Have you ever held a needle and felt the weight of 40,000 years of human creativity? Every step you take carries 3 million years of evolution in its rhythm and grace. The next time you walk barefoot in sand or mud, remember you're continuing an ancient tradition. Your footprints, like Lucy's, tell a story of a species that stood up and changed the world. From volcanic ash to museum displays, from footprints to needles, we trace our long journey home. The earth remembers everything in stone, preserving moments that define who we became and why. Lucy could never have imagined us. Yet we exist because she and her kind dared to walk. And in that walking, in that first upright stride, began every human story ever told or yet to come.